I don't know, have you been through the checkout at Walmart, the self-checkout? Have you noticed there's a little camera pointed at you and you can see yourself on the screen? I just picked up on that this week. There's a camera inside that computer screen, and as you're scanning your own stuff in the self-checkout, you can see yourself. And so I'm looking at that, and I'm like, wow, and I kind of wave, and there I am waving, and then I check my hair, and I've seen worse, And the checkout gal saw me. She said, "Sir, can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I was just taking advantage of your self-checkout." Do you know how long I stood there setting that joke up? You have no idea how long I had to stand there before she asked. I've gotten really good at the self-checkout, by the way. In fact, I almost pride myself that I'm quicker. I watch people who are getting in line for the checkout cashier lines, and I'm faster even with a full cart, and I prided myself a little bit on that. And it started hitting me this week as I was thinking about that maybe I've allowed that to creep into my faith a little bit. That self-reliant attitude of I'll just do it myself. And what might be true of me, it might be true of you also. We don't ask Jesus enough for miracles anymore. When was the last time you asked Jesus for a miracle? I mean a real, where your back was against the wall, there was no solution, there was no way out of this. It would require a miracle to happen. When was the last time you asked for one? I don't get every one of my miracle requests answered yes. And then sometimes I do. Today is a miracle story. I don't know where you're at in your spiritual journey, but this is a miracle story, and I'm going to tell you what skeptics say about this story, and I'm going to tell you why I believe in this story. There are only two miracles in the Bible, two miracles in four gospel writers, four guys who were told to write the story of Jesus. Only two times do they repeat a miracle. One is the miracle of the resurrection. All four writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they all four write about the resurrection. And today's miracle, the feeding of the 5,000, which begs the question, why was this miracle so significant that all four of them made sure to mention it? Now, understand, we're pretty confident that Mark, the Gospel of Mark, was written first, and then Matthew took Mark's outline, but he filled in a lot more of what was there. Luke then, after seeing what Mark and Matthew wrote, Luke writes his gospel, and he says, I know others have written, but I'm going to give it to you in more detail. And so Luke writes, and his book gives a lot more detail than even what Matthew and Mark gave. And then much later, the Apostle John looks at what the other three wrote about, and he said, oh, they missed so many great stories. I'm going to tell you some more. And he fills in a whole bunch of stories that none of them told. However, all four of them, even by the time John, you would think after three people wrote about the feeding of the 5,000, John wouldn't mention it. But it's so significant in his mind, too, that he writes about it also. And it just begs the question, why? Why this miracle? The resurrection, I get why they would write about that, but why the feeding of the 5,000? This will be the most massive, most witnessed miracle Jesus will do. This is the largest crowd that will ever see him do a miracle. This is the one. And it's highly significant. It has all kinds of Old Testament connections, and it's just rich with teaching material. But in regards to miracles that we're talking about, miracles always start with a problem that can't be solved. And maybe you need a miracle today. Maybe you need a financial miracle, or an occupational miracle, or an addiction miracle, or a health miracle, a parenting miracle, a marriage miracle. Ron, there's not enough counselors in the world to fix my marriage problems. That might be true, but maybe what would happen if both of you just added Jesus a little bit to your problem? Today's miracle begins with a crowd. Now, before I go into this, there's a crowd following Jesus. They've been following Jesus for several days now, and I need you to know that because that's part of the answer against the skeptics. But they've been following Jesus, this crowd. And every time Jesus tries to break away a little bit with his disciples for just a little training time, he takes his disciples up on the edge of this mountain. The crowds follow him there. You know? I don't know what it would be like. What would it be like on a Sunday morning to preach 4 times, and then on my way home, you all just followed me to my house, and you're standing out in my yard. You said, tell us more. It could happen, probably. That's what they're doing to Jesus right now. So we pick up the story in verse 5, chapter 6, verse 5. When Jesus looked up and he saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, where shall we buy bread for these people to eat? He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Did Jesus just ask a trick question? Is that what, am I reading that right, a trick question? He already knows these guys aren't that smart anyway, but let's put them to the test a little bit. Oh my goodness. Anybody married to someone who puts you to the test once in a while? You know, did you see what that lady was wearing? Nope. What lady? Don't fall for it. Isn't that Jennifer Aniston still pretty? No. What is Jesus doing here? He's testing them. Verse 7, Philip answered Jesus, it would take more than a half a year's wage to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. Oh, I love this. Philip is a numbers cruncher. You know numbers cruncher. Every team needs one, but they can be a little annoying at times, you know. Just give me the data, give me a slide rule, I'll get a spreadsheet, and in a few moments I'll have your answer. And Philip looked at this situation. He saw this large crowd. He saw that we got to feed them, and he immediately in his mind crunched the numbers and said, it will take a half a year's wage, a half a year. Not 3/4 of a year, not a full year's wage, a half a year's wage, just so each of them could have just a bite. The problem with Philip, though, is he's a pessimist when it comes to walking with Jesus. He's a pessimist. 2 pessimists came to church. They walked in, and instead of shaking hands, they just looked at each other and shook heads. You'll get that in a moment here. Pessimists. Philip knew this area. Philip was from this area. If anybody knows where all the McDonald's and Burger Kings are, it would have been Philip. But Philip is not adding the Jesus factor. Andrew is going to do things a little differently. Andrew's going to try to solve the problem, but he doesn't have any faith. Look what Andrew does in verse 8. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves, 2 small fish, but come on, how far will they go among so many? You know, I like Andrew in this story because he's bringing someone to Jesus, and there's a whole bunch of us in this room. We would be happy to be an Andrew for the rest of our lives. Just, we love Jesus, and we love people, and connecting Jesus and people together just gives us the greatest thrill. And we would just be content forever to just be an Andrew in this world. Andrew's doing that, but that's not the point of today's story. There's this little boy who offers up his lunch to Jesus. It is the most generous, outrageously generous gift anyone could do, and it's a boy who does it. If you're imagining someone between 10 and 15, you're probably right where you need to be in this story. He comes and offers Jesus his lunch. But that's not the point of the story either. The point of the story is what happens when Jesus is a part of it. When Jesus was testing Philip, the right answer would have been, well, it will take a miracle to feed him, but it's a good thing we have you with us because you do miracles. That would have been the right answer. Sometimes when I'm struggling inside my problem and I'm trying to just handle it myself, to be able to just stop for a moment and say, you know what, Jesus, I have you in my life. And you do miracles, and so I'm going to ask for a miracle today. That would have been the right answer. Verse 10, Jesus said, have the people sit down. Oh, there's plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Everyone agrees. Wherever there's men, there's women. Wherever there's women, there's children. So this is a crowd of more than 10,000 people. Everybody agrees with that. But why did you need to know it was grassy there? Why did John, who's writing this and telling us this, made sure that you knew it was a really grassy place? Because this is one of those rare Old Testament connections you need to be aware of. Way back in the Old Testament, they all had Psalm 23 memorized. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in what? Green pastures. The Messiah they were waiting for, this great shepherd they were waiting for, would make them lie down in green pastures. And here's John trying to tell you, this is him. He's right here, because everything was green and he made them lie down. He made them rest there. Verse 11, Jesus then took loaves. He gave thanks. He distributed it to those who were seated as much as they wanted. And he did the same with the fish. Bread as much as they wanted. Any bread lovers here? I love bread. You go to the Olive Garden, all you can eat breadsticks. Come on, who likes that? I like that. You know? Texas Roadhouse, hot rolls with that cinnamon butter. Come on, who wants it? Yeah. Go to Red Lobster, you know, cheddar garlic biscuits. Are you hungry yet? All you can eat. Just keep bringing. You know, would you like to take some home with you? Yeah, put them in a bag. I'll take them home with me. When our children were smaller, we used to go down to Gulf Shores, Alabama, and we'd stop at a restaurant called Lambert's. Anybody familiar with Lambert's? They throw hot rolls at you. If you want a hot roll, you just go, roll, and they whip it across the room. My kids loved that. The problem was when they brought that behavior home, that was a problem, but hot roll, throw all you want. Can you imagine being in a situation, you've been following Jesus for a few days now. You're tired and you're hungry. The disciples are tired and they're hungry. Jesus starts multiplying this food. Verse 12, when they all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted. So they gathered them, and they filled 12 baskets with pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over from those who had eaten. Okay, just so you know a little bit, in the ancient Greek, there's a different word for basket sizes. There's a different word for a small basket that you hold in your hands. There's a different word for a medium-sized basket. And then there's a different word for a large basket that would have been about this deep, a large basket. The word that's used here for the 12 baskets left over is the big one, the big, deep basket. That's very important to know because skeptics have made fun of this story. Skeptics who want to deny the deity of Jesus have gone after this story. One of the things they say is that Jesus chopped everything up into small morsels, so it was like a communion service. He took those 5 barley loaves and he took those 2 fish, which by the way, the fish would have been like sardines, and he cut them up into such small pieces that well over 10,000 people got a morsel, just a tiny morsel, but when they ate it, the miracle was that they were immediately full. Isn't Jesus amazing? Try to do that. Try to cut up that amount of food into that small of pieces and see if you can distribute it among 10,000 people. Can't be done. The other miracle explanation is William Barclay. He talks about that everybody there had food. Nobody traveled without food. Everyone had food. He doesn't take into account this is their 3rd day of following Jesus. But everybody had food. But when it was time to eat, nobody pulled theirs out. They didn't want to have to share. They were just being stingy. And then in front of all of them, this boy goes up and he offers up his lunch. And oh my goodness, everybody's so convicted. And how can we be so stingy? So everybody pulled out their food. Everybody shared. Everybody ate until they were full. And when it was done, they were still able to collect 12 large baskets. Boy, doesn't Jesus know human nature? What a miracle worker he is. That's nonsense. And here's why it's nonsense. Here's why I believe this story. Because well over 10,000 people were there. There's too many witnesses, too many people saw this miracle to tamper with it. And most of those people would have still been alive by the time that these disciples were writing about this story. If they would have falsified any of the miracle stories that involved large crowds, they'd have been called out by someone. And even Josephus, who is a historian of that time, never has any witnesses who call out Jesus for these stories that are told. You may not be ready to believe the story of the miracle feeding, but I'm there. I don't buy the skeptics' excuses as to what's happening. This wasn't a trick. It wasn't a gimmick. It wasn't a potluck. Jesus fed 10,000 people by multiplying the food. As those disciples went around with those baskets never went empty. Every time somebody reached in, there was something to grab. And it just kept multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. Well, real quick, let me finish this up. Verse 14, after the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world. If that's a little bit confusing to you, that's an Old Testament reference again. Deuteronomy 18, Moses said, one day somebody greater than me comes, a prophet. And so they were always looking for this prophet. When the Pharisees are questioning John the Baptist, are you the Messiah? He said, no, I'm not the Messiah. Do you remember what else? Are you the prophet that was promised to us? They asked him that. He says, no. When Philip goes to his brother Nathanael in John chapter 1 to get him to come follow Jesus, he says, we have found the one that Moses wrote about. He's talking about that prophet. And so all these people who witnessed this, they conclude that Jesus is the prophet. They don't conclude he's the Messiah. They don't conclude he's the Son of God yet. That does come from crowds, but here they just give him credit for being the prophet. Verse 15, Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. What an irony that they would come to the one who is already king, that they would come to the one who's been the King of Kings and try to force him to be a king on their terms. We get people who are investigating Jesus right now, and we encourage that. We want you to come. We want you to hear the investigation so you can make up a good decision. But beware of coming to Jesus and saying, I'll come if you do this for me. That's requiring him to be the king on your terms instead of his terms. And that's a dangerous place to be. Well, what do we need to know from this story? Man, I struggled with this because I've preached this story before. In the past, I've talked about the joy of evangelism, Andrew bringing somebody to Jesus and how we could all be evangelists that way. I've preached that. I've preached on the area of Jesus providing the provision that God provides. Moses provided manna in the wilderness. Jesus is greater than Moses. Moses provided water out of a rock. Jesus is greater than Moses. He provides living water. You know, I've done the provision sermon before. I've done the sermon where the little boy comes with his unbelievable generous gift. And I've talked about living a life that's generous, not just in the church, but outside the walls. But I was asking myself, what do we need to hear this week? And for some reason, I got locked in on one word, we. I went past it pretty fast, but I'll call your attention back to it. Jesus asked Philip, how are we going to feed these people? Do you see? Jesus is in this game with us. You're not all by yourself. This isn't a self-checkout, your faith walk. Jesus wants to be involved in your life. He wants to be invited into your world. He wants to be invited into your mess. He wants to be invited into your situations. He wants to be invited into those areas where you're like, there's no help. Nobody can fix this for me. That's where Jesus wants to be invited into. And he says the word we. Later on, Jesus will say, without me, you can do nothing. With me, you'll do greater works than these, Jesus said, but without me, you can do nothing. Jesus invites us into this partnership with him today. And I'm betting that just like I needed to hear we, some of you today needed to hear we. Philip, he missed the Jesus factor when he was trying to answer the problem. Andrew missed the Jesus factor when he was trying to come up with a solution. It never occurred to the other disciples to turn this problem over to Jesus. In fact, one would be hard-pressed to find any faith on that hill that day. And these are all men who had seen Jesus do unbelievable things already. Philip is too busy being a cynic. Be careful of being a religious cynic. That doesn't help you find the answer. It actually starts to pull you away. Andrew's too busy being doubtful. But what's such a small gift among so many? He just is plagued with doubt. Be careful of doubt. The question is not my pessimism. The question is, what is God trying to reveal to me? Am I open to what God is trying to reveal to me? And I'm starting to feel that there is some things there. You may be faced with something right now that's too big for your life. Something that's out of reach. Something that is too tiring to carry. What was not enough in this story suddenly became more than enough because they added Jesus to the problem. So here it is. Your hurt plus Jesus equals healing. Your addiction plus Jesus equals freedom. Your broken relationship plus Jesus equals hope. Your lack plus Jesus equals fullness. Your loneliness plus Jesus equals companionship. I could go on and on. Where do you need to invite Jesus into your life right now? Oh, we talk about the miracles of the past. Look what God did in the days of Moses. All these great miracles. We love miracle stories, even in the life of Jesus, but that was 2,000 years ago. We talk about the miracles that are still to come, the second coming of Jesus, the book of Revelation, all those miracles that are going to come. But we fail to talk about miracles right now. Where do you need a miracle today? Where do you need a we in your life? God, I'm going to add Jesus to this problem and see what happens. Don't just rely on yourself. Ask him for it. So the elders and I want to thank that train for going by right now. That was perfect timing. You can hear me. A 6-year-old little girl named Emma has inoperable cancer. She's a twin. And she's a granddaughter of Harold and Jeannie Boyer. And the elders and I have been taking a day a week and just praying and asking God to do a miracle. I mean, just coming right out saying, we need a miracle. You know, the doctors, I would love to see the doctors just blown away. I'd love to see the nurses blown away. I can't imagine being a young parent and trying to squeeze every important moment out, trying to spend as much time with their daughter as they possibly can. But it's, you know, there's good days and bad days, and that's where they're at right now in the process. And I've asked the elders to pray with me. We're going to ask for a miracle, and they've done that, and I've done that. We haven't gotten the answer we're looking for just yet, and we're trusting God. And listen to me, for everyone who needs a miracle, God can be hard to trust sometimes. I understand that, but that's where we're at. We're going to trust him. But we're going to ask also. Ask for a miracle. I have a little Emma. She's my granddaughter. She's only 2. I can't imagine being where Harold and Jeannie Boyer are right now. They would trade places with their granddaughter in a second if God would allow it. But sometimes God has a much bigger plan in place. But we're asking for a miracle. I'm going to lead us in a prayer of miracle today too for Emma at some point. But maybe you could join me. Ask for your own miracle, but also pray for Emma sometime, whenever God brings that to your mind. Why do I do this? Why do I ask for miracles and not always get the answer I want? Because of Ephesians 3:20. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than you ever ask or even imagine. He does more than you ask or can even imagine.